1 minute. Sorry, started a little early here. For those of you watching afterwards, you got to deal with me for a minute before I start things. Let's set power. That should be good. All right. Dealing with the great experiment tonight. I'll explain, but if I have to suddenly leave, we'll know why. All right. Other than that, let's see. I've got a pile of email to go through and a car to unload. I did not get the lawn mowed, unfortunately, if anybody's playing along with the home game. All right, here we go. Good evening. Is this frequency in use? Oh, nothing heard. Stand by for the beginning of the Sunday night Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club's Science and Technology Net. It is 8 p.m. on Sunday, June 5th, 2022. And we are on the repeater of the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club on 146.805 megahertz with a negative 600 kilohertz shift and a PL tone of 103.5 hertz. Let's pause for any emergency or priority traffic. Nothing heard. If you do have an emergency during the course of the net, just let me know and I will drop the net activity and let you speak. All right. This again is Neil, W2NDG, in Highland, New York, and this is the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. And we're on the repeater, and we are live on YouTube, which is on my YouTube channel. You can find the live stream by just Googling W2NDG Science and Technology. W2NDG Science and Technology. All right. So, a couple of things to preface the night. Yes, I did spend most of the day on Long Island. Went to the Limark Hamfest and got to visit up with my children, which was cool. At least 4 of the 6 of them. And now I'm back home. So I was thinking a topic for tonight, and something we may have talked about once before, but it's always a good topic, is research. Just research in general, but of course, research today is a lot different than it was when I was in high school and college, and we could talk about that. And, using the tools we have today for research. Everybody says, well, I know how to put words into Google. Do you? So we can talk about that. And on top of all that, I thought I'd just mention, which I mentioned to the YouTube audience real quick, the great experiment. And you need to know, just in case I disappear real quick, but I'll try to let somebody know. W2NDG for ID. I don't know if CJ is going to be with us tonight or not, but this is a subject that I'm sure he's in tune to. I have had an issue in my diet with mushrooms for a number of years. I have not been able to digest them. Yesterday, at the advice of a nice woman in Gardner, New York, who sells Korean specialties, I tried a couple of things that she had suggested because I would like to be able to eat them again. And so far it worked with last night's dinner, and I'm trying it again tonight. But if for some reason I am wrong and she is wrong, I will let you know if I have to suddenly leave. So it's not what it sounds like. It's just simply I'll get some severe stomach upset at some point if that happens. So, but so far so good. So I think this may have worked. Sorry for the TMI effect, but I do need to warn you if I have to run. So anyway, let's see if Jim, K2BHM, is with us tonight. Jim, are you with us?
I think so. That might have been too much TMI, but we'll see what happens.
Like I said, it's not as bad as it sounds. Unless unless well, if I ate a whole lot of them, it would have been a problem, let's say. But I think so far the advice I got is working, so it's a good thing. Anyway, what do you think of research for a topic tonight, Jim?
I'm not really an expert on research. I haven't really done a lot of it. I've only did 15 years of R&D for the federal government and 15 years for the state. But no, just busting on you. Yeah, it's a good topic. Not sure how things have changed over the years, but we can probe it and see what happens. K2BHM.
Yeah, it's a little bit of understanding how some of these sources play out against each other, and that's kind of what I want to get into. Plus, just some anecdotes about people looking things up and finding some surprising and sometimes obviously wrong answers. It can get interesting. So, what I found interesting was the contrast between my days in college in the 80s and my days in college in the 20 teens, and the difference in that way of looking at things, and also the things that haven't changed, even though they've been modernized, the way that academia looks at research. So just an interesting topic, and we don't have to go in that direction if someone else comes up with something, but that was what I was thinking. All right. So anything new with you, Jim, today that applies to science and technology?
Actually, got out and did some playing around with my on-end generator today, and doing some investigations into thermodynamics and logistics and the gains of feedback and stuff like that, trying to get it tuned in and so forth. So it was interesting, but there's quite a lot of things you might want to not know about research over the years.
Well, I have some favorites. Most of them are jokes, things that didn't actually happen, but just demonstrate poor conclusions. And there's some good stuff, the extensive expansion of Murphy's laws is always one of my favorites, and how it applies to all these different things that we study and research and look into. So, all right, let's see who's with us tonight. We'll take check-ins, and you can check into the net by giving me your call sign, your name, and your location. Please come in.
Was that check-in? KD2MNR, Mike, Gypsy.
Sounds like it's just three of us.
Well, I got you, Mike. There was someone, it sounded like someone tried to check in. But yeah, that's it. I'm wondering if Matt got lost in the jungle.
UBP.
No, I get it. Only people named Mike can check in tonight.
Jack, am I on?
I mean, I have to leave.
Well, we can be honorary Mikes. You have an M in your call sign. All right. So I have Mike from Poughkeepsie, Mike from Tivoli. Anybody else out there?
Nobody out here. Pauls don't qualify as mics. I gotta throw Paul in and 3EY2.
All right. Paul from Rosendale. And Paul stepped on somebody who was very quiet, who was trying to check in.
This is 82 Zulu Delta Foxtrot Linda in Poughkeepsie.
Thought I recognized the voice of K2BHM.
Yes, thought that was Linda. All right. There's somebody with a very weak signal who keeps trying to check in, and I'm sorry, you're just not getting enough audio in that I can even tell who it is. So, all right. So that's Mike, KD2MNR, Mike, KC2UVP, Paul, N3EYQ, Linda, KD2ZDF. Anybody else? All right. Well, we'll start there. I'm actually concerned about Matt. He hasn't missed one of these. All right. So, I don't know where to steer this. It was just something I was thinking about while I was driving back home. And I think part of it, actually, let me explain what sparked this whole thing. That's probably the best way to do it. What brought me to this point. And what's funny is, one of the things that I think we'll bring up tonight is Wikipedia, which is sometimes a great source, sometimes not. And I'm not going to explain why, but I'll let one of you do that. Somebody, as we go around, tell me why Wikipedia is not a good source. And my phone is ringing, of course. So, I have this thing. It holds the bedroom door open. And actually, if you give me 20 seconds, I'm going to go grab it so I can hold it up to the YouTube camera here.
So in the meantime, anybody heard any good jokes?
Wikipedia.
I think where he's going with that might possibly be that it's crowdsourced, so there is no credentials associated with information put up, but let's see what he comes up with.
I concur. And you want a bad joke? Here's your bad joke segue. How many Jewish women does it take to screw in a light bulb? And we'll sit in the dark.
Good one, Mike. Ethnic without being offensive. I appreciate that. Let me drop. W2NDG. Sorry for the pause. Yes, I was listening, Jim. It's funny. Wikipedia is it is crowdsourced, but it's edited. It does require references, and if you don't have a valid reference, they will flag one of your facts as unchecked. The problem is that because it's crowdsourced and there is there's a amount of time sometimes that passes between somebody fact checking something and somebody posting a fact. There can be serious misinformation in between those periods of time. So, whereas a lot of Wikipedia does give references, sometimes those references may not be fact-checked themselves. It is a great place to start. But most universities do not appreciate you using Wikipedia as any kind of fact reference. You can use it as a launching point to do your research, though, and follow the references that they list. So that's one of those things. But yeah, I've seen some seriously damaged Wikipedia entries where somebody really had some fun with some of them and put some really crazy information. All right, let me drop and explain what I'm holding in my left hand here. I'm holding this thing up to the camera. It is made of leather, and we found it here in the house when we first moved in. And it has two lumps on either end, and it's shaped, I don't know, kind of like a drawn-out figure eight in shape. And then, obviously, if you feel this thing, the lumps on either end contain some sort of very heavy weight, probably lead. And what this was doing in my house is not what it was made for. And that's what threw me off. And this is what I was thinking about, is I wanted to research how to buy more of these. So I'll explain to you where I found it, and then we'll talk about what it really is and how I figured that out. So this thing was under the bedroom door in this house. And it allows, because it's weighted, it allows me to move the door between fully closed and fully open, and anything in between, without it continuing to skate. It keeps it in that position. It's kind of like a movable doorstop. And for a door that may not be balanced correctly, or one in a house where you have small furry creatures that are constantly moving things like doors around, it keeps things from swinging or moving with the wind if you're cooling your house with regular air. I thought it was a brilliant idea. A really cool invention. And because it's thinner in the middle than it is on the edges, the door, kind of fits over it perfectly and won't go past the raised lumps on either end. So I kept searching, thinking of different phrases to search for. Movable doorstop, leather movable doorstop, weighted movable door, all these different things that I was thinking of. Door retainer. I tried so many different phrases and never found it. Now, my method of research with something like this, if I don't see the descriptions that are coming up that look like what I'm looking for, I go to an image search. If I'm searching for an object, a thing, I'll put the words in and then immediately go to the image search and start scrolling through the images to see something that resembles this. And I never found it. So I started thinking this was something that the former homeowner, or possibly his wife, had made. So I figured, well, maybe this is something we can make. Recently, I started thinking about it again, and I don't know why I didn't think about this the first time, but I took a picture of it and uploaded the picture to Google Image Search. Google Image Search can be worthwhile and sometimes can be not worthwhile. It's a funky way of searching for things by searching by image. It'll always try to look for an exact match when you upload an image, which does come in handy sometimes. If you're dealing with an image that was already taken, like you borrowed it from a web page, say you saw a picture on a web page from an ad of a piece of electronic equipment or a person, and you don't know who that person is, search for that image and it will find other versions of that exact image out on the internet. And by looking at the page that those images are on, sometimes you can figure out what or who they are. It will also look for visually similar images when you upload an image. It's another type of image search. That can be hilarious because we're not quite at that level of AI understanding of image similarity yet. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's horrendously and hilariously wrong. So when I put the picture of this thing in, the similar image search turned up a lot of shoe insoles. Like the leather Dr. Scholl's ones. There was a lot of different shoe insoles. But as I was browsing through the page, I saw one picture, which was exactly the same object that I had uploaded. I followed the link, and lo and behold, it has nothing to do with doorstops. It's just something that the former homeowner here decided to do with this thing. It is a weighted bookmark. And it's for holding a book open when you're trying to go hands-free with a book that keeps closing or turning pages by itself. I can think the best use for it would be in the kitchen when you're trying to hold a cookbook open while you're using the recipe to cook. A weighted bookmark. Using it as a movable doorstop is something that the guy who lived here before me managed to figure out. Maybe his wife did. I don't know. But one of them did. So anyway, that's my line of thought that led me to the point about research. And, obviously, I didn't do this correctly the first time because I assumed that it was what it was being used for. Sometimes that's not the case. So if something isn't what you think it is, sometimes you have to go with that extreme descriptive type of search. So as far as what it's used for, no, what is it? Describe it. Describe it to the T. How long is it? How wide is it? How thick is it? What's it made of? What color is it? And we have image search today to do that, which definitely does work in some cases. I have on my phone an app that allows me to take a picture of a leaf or a flower or a fruiting body of a plant and upload it to the internet, and it will tell me what it thinks it is. As long as you take good pictures and you understand how to look at the answers and not immediately look at the first answer and say, oh, that's it. It's edible. Let's try some. No. Once you learn how these things work, sometimes you learn to throw out a couple of the answers. But the one I've been using is about 90% accurate. It's pretty cool. So, I wish I had this technology a long time ago. But, yeah, that's what brought me to this point. All right. Jim, K2BHM. Does that sound better?
Well, my experience over the last 30 years have been totally different. I'm dealing with researchers and scientists and technicians and so forth that are, I wonder what would happen if we did this. And then I have to figure out how to make the piece of equipment to make that happen. And then let them see if what their process is correct or off base or close but no cigar. Let's try this or whatever. Manipulate this, tweak that. It's totally different. I'm not describing words to a artificial intelligence. I'm dealing with real people with real life events that have a curiosity, and I made things to test the hypothesis and see where it goes.
Have you read any Vonnegut? Kurt Vonnegut?
Is it contagious?
I'm thinking of a particular book I read by Kurt Vonnegut called Not Player Piano, Cat's Cradle. And in Cat's Cradle, there is a scientist who's sounding a lot like what you're telling me. And I think it's at some point in the history of the novel, the president is complaining to the scientist that he hates that soldiers have to deal with wading in mud and swamps, and he wishes there was a way to deal with that, with getting rid of the mud and the swamps for the soldiers. And I won't get into the how, but the scientist decides to come up with a solution for it. And it's a major part of the plot of the book. But, and his solution is, not always something that you would say is in the box. And but we had a whole night on thinking out of the box when we first started this net. And Jim, that's what I'm thinking of when you talk about this, is that you're not always going to do exactly what somebody says, but you need to interpret what they're looking to get to. And it may not be exactly the way they describe it always. Does that sound right?
Yeah, K2BHM Friday. I've been through so many different things over the years, military and scientific and research and medical, and it's been such a wild ride. I don't even know where to begin. I've taken new state-of-the-art sensors and incorporated into pieces of machinery to increase the accuracy by 100-fold. Something that's never been done before. Made laser tractor beams. It's just so many things over the years. Oh my God! I even took a speaker and cemented a rod off the back of it on a holder so you could hold it on a ring stand, and made a arm that comes around and holds a little piece of plastic rod that was glued to the voice coil and then sharpened to a needle point. So when you fed the signal into the speaker, you could actually take this little needle point and vibrate it in and out. And they would tickle the hairs on the leg of a cockroach and then measure the electrical impulses off the nerves to study the transmissions. So, yeah, I've been everywhere.
Do they prefer classical or heavy metal?
Irrelevant. Transient times was the key. So I even made rat boxes. So you would put a rat in a box, and you would put something hard on one side and something soft on the other side. And if you went and preferred the hard, it would rock one way and trigger a timer. If you went the other way, like soft, trigger a timer the other way. And we could tell what preferences rats had.
All interesting stuff. I've spoken about this before. I think that same night that we did the thinking outside the box discussion was that I stumbled on a room in one of our research buildings where there were these three guys, and this is what they do. A lab comes to them with an idea for a device or an experiment, and they produce it. One guy was a mechanical engineer, one guy was an electronics engineer, and the third guy was a software guy. And using electronics, microcontrollers, and various erector set style mechanics and software, they would come up with custom machines to be used in the labs for various things. But it's very cool when we think about stuff like this. But back before the internet, this research was all done in books. You had to have a library, whether it was your own, your employers, your institutes, or go to a place where all of this information was. Think about the practice of law 40 years ago versus today. And that's a great example. And not just the internet, but let's say the ability to perform searches on large amounts of information. So you may not be keeping data, or using data from the internet to find something out. This might be data that you've collected on your own computer, your own storage, and the ability to search large amounts of text for results and actually organize it. is referred to sometimes as big data, unorganized data, or sometimes non-relational databases. There's different terms for dealing with this type of information, and it's being used to solve a lot of problems. I know it's a big deal where I work. So, but yeah, things have really changed. And although I'm sure Jim will tell me, it's that the person, the human element still has to be in there. But all of these tools definitely would have helped you, right?
Well, yes and no. Your description of the three different guys, each attacking a different problem or a different aspect of the problem, is very accurate. But in my case, most of the time, I was all three. And then in the military, it was secret. So I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't Google anything. I had problems with a microprocessor from Intel. I couldn't call them up and tell them what I'm doing and ask for help. It was secret. So, yeah. Other people had some luxuries that I didn't have, but it was all fun.
Well, yeah, and that's why I'm saying it's not necessarily just the internet that I'm talking about. So today, I'm pretty sure that if you were working on something like this for the military, you would have a data library that you could search using intelligent tools and output information that could be organized. And that's what's done now. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying. But they have ways of organizing this stuff down. It makes it very interesting. So let's go around. And I can think for each one of you, Mike, KD2MNR, I'm sure you've had a couple of times where you've had to say something like, that's not going to fit in there.
Yes, I have many times. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. That's why I waited. And the repeater identified. So KD2MNR for IT. Neil, you mentioned three different things, and basically you took all of my answers. You mentioned Wikipedia, and yes, many times Wikipedia is wrong because you and I can go and change Wikipedia. And like that. And then you held up your doorstop, and Linda and I both looked at it, and we knew exactly what it was. And then you took that away from us. So, and then I was going to mention the app on my phone where I can go and identify it's free or a bug or stuff like that. And then you took that away from me. So, but yeah, there's lots of times where I've seen, somebody was going to do something and I'm going, yeah, that's really not going to work there. And then they try it and they, mess things up. And I'm not one to say I told you so, but, toot toot, I'm tooting my own horn. Anyway, so that's about it. I do need to secure, I need to get up early. So I will turn it back to you, Neil, W2NDG. This is KD2MNR.
All right, Mike. Sorry to take all of that away. But the Wikipedia thing is a great discussion in itself, because what a lot of people never do with Wikipedia is to look at all that fine print that's on the entries, all the references. Follow some of them. If you're really, really trying to figure something out, follow a reference and look at how valid it is. Look at if it's something, from somebody who, has a reputation of being a factual source. If you get a reference for something that, there's really nothing to back it up on, you just don't know. I can give an example. I don't want to go down too far into this rabbit hole because it can get very controversial sometimes. And we sometimes don't like to get in that direction, but sometimes we can get into debates. Somebody, a friend of mine, sent me an article one time talking about the effects of fluoride on the population in fluoridated water. And there's been a lot of back and forth on this over the years from many different people and many different sources. I won't get into, the basics of that. But the majority of people who talk about this and research it feel that in the small quantities that is, that's put into some of the water supplies, that it is entirely safe. But there's always been people against it. This was an article that somebody who knew that I worked in the dental business for many, many years and was working, still in it at the time, that basically pointed to a study, and that's a great word when we talk about research and facts, a study that was done showing that children in this study who were on fluoridated water supplies had lower IQs than children who were on non-fluoridated water supplies. There was a huge flaw with the study, though. They had limited the data only to countries in the world that had high concentrations of heavy metals in their water in general, things other than fluoride that weren't supposed to be there, like lead and all sorts of things. Not good. And they had avoided most of the industrial nations that had good water. So that was an example of flawed research, flawed study. There's one of the famous ones was a school that did a study. They had a teacher who they put plants in a classroom next to a Wi-Fi router and put plants in a classroom that had no Wi-Fi router. And the plants in the classroom without the Wi-Fi router thrived. And the ones with the Wi-Fi router didn't grow that well. And they grew kind of funny. But there was no control. There was no measurement of what else was going on in the rooms. Were they fed by different parts of the ventilation system? Were they kept at different temperatures? Did they get weird lighting effects because of the way the windows were set? Was the janitor going into one of the rooms at night and spraying disinfectant on something? There was no control in the experiment. Nothing really that looked at any other part of this. When a company that is tasked with doing something like this, an experiment like that, it's done in a controlled environment with multiple control sets to try to see what happens and make sure that everything is done the same. So, but that got passed around quite a bit. No. And one of the things that we talk about in ham radio a lot is that RF radiation is not ionizing radiation. And that's why sometimes people get scared about radio waves or cell phones or strong RF energy from towers and things like that. Yeah, you can get an RF burn from your radio. It's happened to me, but it is not radiation in that sense of the word. It does not do the same thing to us. So, one of the things I always say when people tell me about this research or that research or this study is I always say, follow the facts. Just make sure you're looking at something that's factual, because there was a time when the cigarette companies produced studies showing that cigarette smoking was healthy. Yeah. All right. Mike, KC2UVP, any comments on tonight's topic of research?
Hey, everybody, sorry for the delay. Hey, look, I've even out here in the boondocks, I get company. KCTVP listening, but not talking. Sorry. Get up with you after I'm done evaluating your diatribe. Bye.
All right, Mike. I've marked you as secure, but you can always pop up if you need to comment. Paul, N3EYQ. Anything on tonight's topic?
Not really. I just happened to walk in on my way home when I first checked in. So finished my dinner. Kind of listening in the background. N3UIQ.
All right, Paul. Thanks. And Linda, are you tucking Mike in, telling him a story?
No. He's clearly the storyteller of the family. No, when I was thinking about what you were saying with research, before the internet, my research would always begin with a phone call to either, a family member that I knew might have some input on what I was trying to figure out, or an object I was trying to determine what it was. So that was always a great resource for me. Beyond that, then of course you would start with the library and the card catalog and fun stuff like that. It's interesting. One of the things that I've noticed with my job as well, it's been a learning experience. When I first started cake decorating, there was a very limited amount of classes and things like that. So I had to learn everything on my own, trial and error. And error was very painful because you had an unhappy customer. So sometimes I get very jealous of people entering the field now because there's a million YouTube videos about how to do all of the things that I had to learn to do. And there's a lot of engineering that goes into, completing, delivering, and having, these cakes stay upright for the duration of whatever the event is. So I've had to use a lot of ingenuity with that. One of the things that Mike has always been very proud of that he helped me with was a spinning carousel. We actually took a windshield wiper motor and electrified it, so to speak, slowed it down, and made a turntable, then created a carousel to have a spinning cake for an event. So, beyond that, research is very different now. You're asking Siri, you're asking Google. I still like to go the old route first and talk to resources that I know that have been there and done that. And you guys are a great source for that, I might add. Katie 2, ZDF.
Thanks, Linda. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. It's a good point, and I think this community has trained a lot of people to do that. I don't go right to the internet for everything, and it's one of these things like we were talking about electric cars for a couple of weeks here. And whereas I probably could have, through a lot of searching, figured out how all these charging stations work, I wanted to crowdsource that. I wanted to talk to people because we have a couple of people in the club that know these things. And I frequently will ask questions. When I first joined the team I'm on at Sloan Kettering, there were a couple of guys on the team that used to chastise me for asking questions that I could search for on the internet. And that annoyed me to no end. And I've let the guys that have, come after me that I've taught, I've let them know to ask me questions because I love answering questions. I don't have a problem with people asking me questions, even if they're easy ones, because sometimes, even though Google may have the answer, it may not be, yes, it's A, B, and C, but you have to watch out for D, which could happen. It's not always the answer you're getting from Google. And some of it has to do with experience. Some of it has to do with unique environments. There's a lot of nuances. And I go back to that, those guys who, even one of them went so far as to send the rude, let me Google that for you answer page to me once. And, I don't have a problem with people asking me questions. I'm sorry that it annoyed these folks, but they don't work there anymore. That's a good thing. Anyway, thanks, Linda. And I'll relate where I used to have to go to get the answers. Other than just family, asking parents and brothers and, friends and other relatives. And my dad, at some point in his life, when he was between jobs and looking for something to do, sold encyclopedias. And if anybody has any relatives that have ever done this, the first customer an encyclopedia salesman has is usually themselves. So yes, I grew up with a full set of Americana Encyclopedia on the shelf in our house. I think it was the 1967 edition, maybe. So granted, as the world changes, you have to be careful with country names and borders, but it was a great resource. And well, back then, it's all we had. There really wasn't a lot else to go after, but my parents had amassed another fantastic resource that kept us out of the library. My father had been receiving National Geographic since 1949, I believe, and we had a complete set of National Geographic through the years from 1949 on. And every, I think, certain number of years, that Dad would buy the index. And they have these boxes, too, that you could put all the volumes in by year. But we had the indexes. It was usually a hardcover book that you could look stuff up in, and it would give you all the different, the issue and the page that your answer would be on, or at least the article. And then we had all the list of maps that they'd included over the years, and there was a book that you kept all the maps in as well. What a great resource, back before we had the internet anyway. And when all else fails, there's the library and the Dewey Decimal System. Libraries are still there, though, and sometimes it's a great place to go to find answers just to make your brain work a little differently and get off the internet. All right. Is there anybody else who would like to join us tonight? Throw me your call sign, your name, and your location.
Quick update, Jim.
Update from Jim.
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, before Google, when I worked for the federal government, research and development, every morning started with a 2-hour coffee break, which, it's a federal job. Yeah, right. Okay. But it was actually technicians, engineers, scientists, researchers, all getting together with a big mindstorming session. And the prerequisite was you were not going to say anything unless you were sure of it. So you had a bunch of people that had experience, background, various different degrees of education, all putting their ideas forth, and they would not put it forth if they weren't 100% sure of what they were saying. So you took that as gospel and built on that. And there was a wealth of education that beat any college course anywhere, anytime. Drop a second for the second half. Linda, kudos to you. I've been playing around, coming from a scientific background and so forth, playing around a little bit with cooking and baking and so forth, making pizzas and stuff like that. Cooking is an art form. You can twist something around a little bit, add a little more of something, tweak it to your taste or whatever. Baking, that is an exact science. You have to do everything right. The order of the ingredients has to be just right. The temperature has to be right. You can't mix it too little or too much. It all makes a difference. It has to be done perfect or it don't work. And with that, I just had a company pop in, so I got to back on out. And let you guys continue on. K2BHM.
Great, Jim. If you do pop back in, just throw your call sign in when someone drops, and I'll put you back on. But should I skip you for now?
Yeah, I'm going to be a while.
That's fine. No problem. All right. So let's see if there is anybody else out there who wants to join in. Call sign, name, and location. Oh, sorry about that. My mouse froze up here. think it's Bluetooth. It goes to sleep every now and then. I'm just looking. It is Sunday, right? All right. Well, let's see. Mike and Mike secured. Jim secured. Paul N3EYQ was just kind of monitoring us. Linda, I'll throw it back to you since Jim made some really nice comments, but I'll agree. Although there are certainly things that you can vary. You increase one thing, you have to reduce another thing, or of course you have to adjust for things like humidity and altitude. But yeah, it's definitely chemistry. Linda, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. KD2ZDF for ID. The baking part of my job is an exact science. The decorating part is where it becomes very artistic and creative. So that's where it becomes more challenging. As I said, with engineering, if I have a cake shaped like an elephant on top of a cake shaped like a ball on top of something else, these different shapes. There's the engineering factor of making them stable so that you can put it in a truck that can drive down the road for an hour. There's creative work of sculpting and, molding things so that they look like what people want them to look like. So there's both the exact science of it and the creative side of it. A lot of people don't realize sometimes how much goes into and how much expertise. People see something done in an 8-minute video and they're like, oh, hey, I could do that. Which maybe you can, but then there's also the show Nailed It, where a lot of people really can't. And that's true with anything you've done for many years. You get better at it. And that's why, I like to source people that are good at something, because they've been there, they've done that, they've already made the mistake. Why would you want to waste your time making it again? That's basically what I think about when it comes to research and finding out information. KD2, ZDF. Back to you, Neil.
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Well, it's an interesting example of what we're talking about, that stuff that you do, because it is science mixed with art, and there are places where those things cross over. So it's like you're choosing different ways of decorating, but those materials that you're decorating with have to be able to work to interact with the chemistry part too. So it's like, hey, this looks great, I'm going to put this on top of the cake, but is it going to cause issues with it, or issues with some of the other materials I'm using? I imagine it gets really interesting because you can be as artistic as you want to a point, because the physics of it still has to work and the chemistry of it still has to work. It's I guess like people who do mechanical or visual art, sculpting, things like things that get more complicated. So cool stuff. Matt, I did hear you. KB2GGF, you're out there.
Thank you, Neil. Just barely out here. A little late to the program, but I'm glad to be here, and very interesting stuff. And I made some notes listening to what people said, and I think Linda has a very good point. It's valuable to seek out people who are good at doing something, and to seek out more than one of them, because somebody who's good at whatever a particular thing is, you're going to learn a lot from them. And then if you see another person who's also good at doing this, they're going to do things in a slightly different way and have different takes on things, and you might get a very valuable lesson there as well. It's good to see a variety of YouTube is very useful, but often so many people watch the same video. It's a very small number of videos for a very large population of viewers. And so they all seem to get the same lesson.
And I think that sometimes tends to imprint mistakes upon people. But that's just my own thing. So yeah, it's good to have a think tank that you can bounce ideas off of, and we're lucky to have that here, for example. Very valuable thing. I learn a lot here and have fun doing it. Individual research. I used to like the library for that very much, just because of the card catalog. You'd find things that were associated to what you're looking for that you weren't looking for, and that were actually closer to what you wanted. So I remember a time for some reason I had to wait at Mitchell Field for about an hour. So I went over to the Nassau County Community College library and looked up antennas, which led me to the mathematics and physics libraries. And I got a couple of giant textbooks out and laid them out on the table, and was looking at charts and drawings, and learned a lot of things that I didn't think about. So it was very cool. And what the heck else? Oh yes, Encyclopedias and National Geographic. I knew there's some reason why I sort of related to you very quickly when I first met you, Neil, and this may be it. My family also had a collection of National Geographics that started with my grandparents, and they were continuous from 1917, and they were spotty back into the 1890s. And we had World Book Encyclopedias in my childhood home, the 1930 edition, and I think the 1957. So that's where I learned a lot of stuff when I was a little kid. I don't know if National Geographic harmed my mind, but my grandmother would have thought so. Anyhow, really interesting topic, and I'm glad to hear everybody's take on it. Interesting stuff. Back to net, KB2 GGF.
Well, cool stuff. And yeah, and I want to get on the people versus robot thing in a second. But let's see. We do have a couple of people who throw comments in on YouTube sometimes. And sometimes someone has already said what they've posted, so I don't always go back to it. But NE2Z, Joe, had posted user interface design, or UX. And this is something I've worked directly with. I worked for AOL for a number of years, and our head of UX and AOL was a very interesting woman. And the science of designing a user interface, and that goes directly to web page design, is something that really goes to graphical design in general. And it doesn't have to be a web page. It doesn't have to be a user interface. Things need to be easy to understand and easy to see and easy to figure out. And it goes right back to advertising. So yes, and just like with the cakes, it's a combination of art and science. And you have to know how much of one and how much of the other. So you get people who will design a web page or a logo or a advertising sign. And if you go simply with something that you think is visually pleasing, or you're trying to be artistic, you can look at that sign and not know what you're looking at. The trick is that you need to be able to look at something and know what it is instantly. So if I bring up your web page, I need to know what I'm looking at. This is something that Jill and I had to figure out with our little craft business. We noticed, for a long time, it was one of the problems is someone walks up to your display and says, in their mind, what am I looking at? What do they do? And we've gotten it to a point where you should be able to instantly tell what we do. There are still people who come up and look around and ask, but the majority of people who I think walk up, to us know exactly what we're doing. If you look at a sign and you can't figure out A, what it says, and B, what it means, they've failed. And web pages and user interfaces are basically the same thing. You need to know instantly where you're going to start on a, like a web form, or some sort of, series of, check boxes and drop downs and fill in the blanks. But you need to know what you're looking at, and you need to know exactly what to do. And if it's a web page, what are you looking at? What does it mean? What am I supposed to do with it? That's all got to be there. And that is definitely a good combination of art and technology. So, good stuff from Matt. Yeah, I think, trying to remember how far back. I think ours went back to actually like 1945, maybe. I think that he had picked up some earlier ones. And then we had some assorted old ones here and there. But if you went to the library, they had way back. You can get much further back. Now, remember, the first time National Geographic decided to digitize all of the stuff, they had every magazine and all the maps on, originally it was CDs and then DVDs. That was an interesting thing to have. And I did have it at one point. We had invested in that for my kids. So today, it's so much easier to get to information. But once again, don't use Wikipedia as a reference when you're writing a paper, but maybe look at the references that are in it and use them as starting points. I didn't have to deal with references my first run through college. I didn't really get that far. I didn't graduate when I went to college in the 80s, and didn't really get into technical writing and things like that. That came when I went back to school a number of years ago and had to learn references and what they are and how they work, and that you need to reference all of your own facts. If you say that A is true or that B equals C, you need to show why. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. And your reference has to be something accredited, something that has some sort of background and weight to it. That's why we use the libraries in our schools. And most of those are online now, and you can get those references and put them into your research. So your reference can't be, well, this is true because Uncle Jake down the street told me. That doesn't work. And to a lot of these professors, using Wikipedia as a reference is pretty much saying, Uncle Jake down the street told me. So anyway, that's where we are here. There was something else I wanted to throw out, and I can't remember. I'm sorry. But I think it had to do with Wikipedia also. Anyway, all right. Is there anybody else who wants to join us before I throw out a call for final comments? CJ. And I'm sure CJ has had to look in the nooks and crannies when he researches things as well. But, I remember what it was. CJ, hold on a second, but you can participate in answering this if you know the answer. So years ago, when we first started really, really playing with the internet, when things really started to blow up, and the search engines were Alta Vista, Hotbot, Lycos, Yahoo, Dogpile was an early meta search, but there were a bunch of them. One of those search engines that I mentioned was completely different than the other ones. Which one and why? Well, Dogpile was a little different in that it was a meta search, but that just meant it was using more of them all at once. It was still a crawling bot-based search. Which one wasn't? Anybody? All right, I'll answer it. And I miss the fact that this was a thing. Yahoo. Yahoo was not a crawling search bot. Yahoo was an index. You could search the index, and it made it seem like a search engine, but Yahoo was an index. You could drill down through the various subjects and subheadings and subheadings and get to your data that way. You didn't have to just search for it, but Yahoo was curated. It was created by humans. They would actually find experts for each of the various topics and subjects. And I tell you, I miss that, because you could, I think it was still around, when Google really started, but you could go to a search engine and get some of these mechanical results here and there, but you could go to Yahoo and kind of compare some of that and look in the indexes. It's that yellow pages versus white pages thing, which used to drive me crazy years ago when we actually used phone books. When I would run into somebody and you would ask them to look up a phone number for, Jake's Pizza, and they would go to the yellow pages. No, that's not what the yellow pages are for. If you know the name of what you're looking for, you go to the white pages. If you don't know the name of what you're looking for, but you know what you're looking for, like pizza, then you go to the yellow pages and you look under the pizza heading and then look at the listings of all the different places. And I was just amazed that maybe they forgot to teach a lot of people that in school, the difference between the two different methods of searching for things. But that's what Yahoo was. If you had a category of something you were looking for, but not necessarily a name, it was better, because you could drill down and get a whole list of things that fit under that. It was a good thing to have, and it's a shame. I think it got impossible to manage, which is understandable considering what it was. But yeah, that's what it was. All right, CJ, you're up next, and possibly last. But we're talking about research tonight.
Firewood, cook the fire. An excellent conversation. Thank you for running the net. Thank you for bringing excellent conversation to the OMARC 805. With that, I'll put it back to net control. N.
All right, CJ. When I write on my notepad here, as each person checks in their call sign, their name, their location. For your location, I put Woods. I want to hear those peepers over the mic. Although it might be too late for peepers. Katydids and everything else. Oh, it'd be nice to be outside. It must be gorgeous out tonight. But thanks for checking in. Thanks for commenting. All right. Anybody else who wants to come in after CJ? And then we'll just throw open comment. But is there anybody else out there? Well, go ahead.
The mushroom thing. Tell us about the mushroom thing. Where you didn't solve it, or think you solved it.
It seems like it worked. It does. And the woman's her solution or her suggestion to me was to not drink anything. I think it was like an hour before I ate, and at least an hour after I ate. That was one part of the suggestion. The other suggestion was to chew things longer, much longer than you normally would. Not for the mechanical effect of it, but the digestive effect was that your saliva has a much larger portion of the digestive process than a lot of people think. And I know this, I've learned this before, and it's just something I never really thought about again as an adult. But yes, that is true. And the longer you process something before sending it to your stomach, the better your stomach will have at processing it. The water thing, or not drinking in general, has to do with the dilution of stomach enzymes. And she said that if you do not dilute your stomach enzymes before you eat or while your stomach is processing food, it does a better job and the enzymes work better. And all of this made sense to me. So, hey, why not? But so far, so good. And she said to also keep the probiotics up to make sure I am eating my yogurt and my kimchi. She sounds like my doctor. But yes. And other things work as well, like raw sauerkraut, not the stuff in the can, and refrigerated pickles, not the room temperature jarred ones, but all sorts of things like that. Kefir and other fermented products. So I don't. So far, the experiment has worked. The one more step, because I like to do this before I'm not planning on going anywhere. I'll probably make an omelet with the rest of the mushrooms tomorrow morning and see how it works. So, but thanks for asking, CJ. But yeah, that was the solution.
Very good, very good. Key comment on that. The enzyme technique that's going to have if you don't use things from but also not diluting it makes sense. And yes, a lot of enzymes in our saliva. One that I like to give as an example is amylase, and that breaks down starches to simple sugars. So, and that's just one of them. So very good, very good. Glad that's working for you. And there was something else I was going to say, but now I don't remember what it was. So put it back to me. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, CJ, thanks. And at some point, we'll talk about having you, steer the topic for us a couple of times. I wouldn't mind getting back to, some of the stuff you used to do on here in this time slot. So, but thanks for asking, and thanks for offering your input as well. All right. So, is there anybody who would like to throw a comment out on everything we've talked about tonight before we close things up for the official part of the net?
Comment, question.
Comment, KB2GG.
All right, Linda, KD2ZDF first. And no, I don't want you to make me a mushroom cake.
KD2ZDF. Yeah, sorry, I didn't say my call sign with that. I myself am a huge fan of mushrooms. I don't have any issues with digesting them, but that's all very interesting. My question is, I miss the old-fashioned phone book. It used to be very simple to look up a number, especially for a person. Now it is so painful. It is such an absolutely painful process to try and find somebody's phone number on the internet, where everything is supposed to be easy. I don't know if there's like some backdoor site or something that you can use to do that, because everything is all these, paid for ads to find a person or find a phone number. It was so much easier to just, take that book out from under the kid that was sitting on it and look it up. Oh, back to you, Neil.
No, it's a great point. And, some of the sites I used to use have been snatched up, by other companies. And they always go back to that, do you want to check this person's background? But I still have managed to find some basic ones. And if I can find them, a lot of it's trial and error. And I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I'm hitting some of the ones that I think will work, and then I'm cursing at the screen when they're all these ones that lead you to some sort of paid resource. Yeah. What's funny is the early days of digitizing of all this was digital phone books on CD-ROM. It's like the first maps, before we had online mapping and, the ability to render maps so quickly. Maps were just images on CDs and DVDs with some sort of locational code built in. But Yeah, if I find one of those basic ones. I used to have a people search that wasn't basic, but the site was shut down. And what it did, you gave a name, a possible city and state, and it would give you a list of things that it found, including social media results, phone directory results, all sorts of things. And some of them led to paid answers, but a lot of them didn't. And whatever service that was, that went away. So yeah, it's like, no, I don't need to know that, you didn't do this in 1997 or you did that in 2003 or you used to be married to this person. I'm just looking for your damn phone number. I agree. It's maddening. KB2GGF, you also had a comment or question.
Yeah, the baking and precise science part of it really sort of got me thinking. If you have two human bakers, not baking machines, but two human bakers, and they're given the same recipe and the exact same ingredients sourced from the same place, and they cook in the same kitchen and use the same oven at the same time, and you have as many consistent things going on there as possible, and you have them each make a loaf of bread according to the recipe. The two loaves of bread are going to be very similar, but there are going to be some detectable differences between them. One baker may fold shortening into the dough in a different way. Another baker may have a different way of pitching yeast. It's just, there are so many variables. So that just brings me back to the point that it's important to learn from more than one master. You need to get several sources of information and several sources of experience. So I don't know. That's just where my mind was at. And there was one other thing. If I can read my notes. Oh yeah, fermentations. You were talking about various fermented things, both yeast and bacterial fermentations, live cultures, as might be said. Very interesting things, and so much of food and so much of science and so much of medicine, so much of chemistry is involved with it. It's there's an endless topic. But anyhow, really enjoyed the net tonight, and I really thank everybody for their contributions and got me thinking about a whole bunch of stuff, and I thank you. KB2GGF, back to net. Good night, everybody. 73.
Thanks, Matt. And yeah, I agree with your take on baking, and I'm sure, and Linda will probably agree with us. I'll throw it to her for a quick comment on that. But I'll mention that you're right. You're 100% right, because it's technique. And even if a person taught you how to do something, even though your technique will tend to be a subset of theirs, you develop your own. I was taught to bake bread by an Irish woman named Mrs. Macready. She used to stay with us when my parents went away for an extended period of time, and she was quite the cook and chef and baker. And wow, she taught me a lot. But she taught me how to make bread. And some of, when I do some things by hand, because I do have, machines and mixers, but some of what I do by hand is still from little things that she taught me. My mother taught me about baking cakes. She did a lot of scratch baking of cakes, not mixes. And I remember, it says cake flour. What's the difference? And she told me, well, cake flour is just finer. She says, I use regular flour and I sift it twice. That's what she used to do. Her cakes came out okay. And all sorts of other little things. She taught me how to beat eggs with a fork correctly, so that they actually got fluffy. And that's most of what I'm doing with it, and all sorts of little things. And some of them were kitchen myths, that I've realized later on that, things that don't have to be done the way she showed me. But that's how we learn. I'm going to throw it to Linda for comment on the identical ingredients, identical ovens, identical tools, different results.
One of the things that I know I've seen over the years is a lot of what I do is muscle memory. So in somebody kneading dough, one person has weaker hands, one person has stronger hands. Even with decorating, I've seen people with hot hands. Their icing literally melts in their hands. So there are a lot of personal differences. Also, I was thinking about some of your digestive stuff and getting, probiotics and things like that. And I was thinking about sourdough breads, also Amish friendship bread. Those are made with a fermented starter. A couple of things that just popped in my head. KD2 ZDF.
Thanks, Linda. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Yeah, sourdough is definitely something, and actually I love sourdough bread. I didn't get into it because I'm not making this regularly, and that's something like if you're regularly making that type of bread, it's great because the starter begets the next batch and so on and so on. I'll do that with yogurt when I get into it. I'll make yogurt. Sometimes I'll get on a kick and I'll make my own yogurt for a period of how many weeks in a row, because it's the same thing. Once you get the starter, you just keep sampling it to the next batch, and if anybody's never tried to make their own yogurt, if you do eat a lot of yogurt, it is incredibly easy. You don't need any special equipment except a thermometer. You really don't. So anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for joining tonight, and I think we'll wrap things up. You have been listening to and or watching and or participating in the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, where we meet here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. And we'll see you back here next Sunday at 8 p.m. I am Neil, W2NDG from Highland, and usually joined by Jim, K2BHM, who was here earlier, and anybody who checks in. This net and repeater are sponsored by the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club, of which I am a member, and you do not need to be a member of the club to participate in this net or any of the other nets or use our repeater, but we do encourage you to become a member and check us out, and you can do that at omarcclub.org. That's omarcclub.org. Check us out. Also, please note the 3 weekly and 2 daily nets that occur on this repeater. In addition to this net, there is a Monday night net called Undernet, or the Ulster and Northern Duchess Readiness Net, a group of hams discussing how to be ready and to use radio as a tool during an emergency. Thursdays is Thursday Night Technical Net, run by Dave, our club president. Dave takes check-ins and asks for anybody who has a particular topic, a question, or a troubleshooting topic they want to cover. And if nothing comes up, Dave spins the topic wheel and comes up with one for us. Very entertaining net, can run several rounds into the night. And then, of course, this net on Sundays at 8 o'clock. There are 2 daily nets on this repeater as well. 8:35 a.m. is the 8:35 on the 8:05 roundtable net, hosted by a rotating cast of OMARC members. Come by, check in, check us out. We check in, make sure that everybody is okay, and we be a little social in the morning with breakfast and coffee. It's a good little just check-in net where we go around and make sure everyone's all right. And then at 6:30 p.m. every day, we have the 6:30 check-in net, similar to the 8:35 net, but a roundtable net, usually 2 rounds long, where everybody tells us what they did during the day and if they need any help with anything or are having any difficulty. And those are the nets on this repeater. There is also an HF net held by OMARC members on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. on 3835 or 3.835 megahertz. And that is the Overlook Mountain sponsored Hudson Valley 80-meter net on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. This net is also on YouTube at W2NDG Science and Technology. You just have to search for W2NDG Science and Technology to find us. And all of the nets, this is number 51, have been archived here. So please join us online as well. Once again, this is W2NDG Neil from the compound in Highland, New York, signing off, returning the repeater to regular function, and wishing everybody a good night. 7-3. I'll hang out for a few minutes as always, but I am ending the YouTube stream now. Everybody have a good evening.